There is a reason that Obama isn't at the White House. There is a reason that there are Democrats in control of the House and the Senate. And it is a pretty simple reason. Men and women who campaigned as Republicans went to Washington, D.C. and started voting like Democrats. They spent too much money. And we shouldn't be afraid of standing up and saying that was what the problem was. The fact is that if Washington wants a blueprint about how to get this country back on track, to how to move America forward and out of this recession, I can give them a good location to look to. It's the state of Texas. Because you're a Republican. I want to take you back just very quickly in time. In 2003, some people would say, oh, you know, Texas has been this big red state for all these many years. No, it hasn't. Well, it was a Republican state in 1995 when George Bush got elected. No, it wasn't. We still had a Democrat lieutenant governor, Democrat House, Democrat speaker. Well, when you got elected lieutenant governor, for sure it became a Republican state. Nope. We still had a Democrat Speaker of the House. It was in January of 2003, Gerald, when Texas first became, well, in modern history, since Reconstruction, that Texas became a Republican-dominated state. The first time since the 1870s, Mac, that we had a Republican speaker, lieutenant governor, governor, and both houses had majority Republicans. And now remember back, that was 6 years ago, but remember back with me what we found when we got here. The comptroller announced that there was a $10 billion budget. There was a, we don't have deficits in Texas because we got a constitutional amendment that we have to have a balanced budget, so we don't have a deficit. We had a $10 billion budget hole. If you were to keep spending at the level you were spending, you were going to have to, you had two choices. You either cut or raise taxes. We would act differently than anyone who had ever come along before. That we would hold true to Republican values. That we would make the hard decisions. That we would not raise their taxes. And that's what we did. We did exactly what we said we would do. And the editorial boards and the left, they started the whining and the gnashing of teeth. If you can't cut that much out of the budget, you'll be the laughing stock of America. People will leave this state in droves. You'll not be able to recruit any people into this state, either to your universities or your businesses. It will be an absolute disaster. We heard all of those horror stories about you can't cut that much out of that budget without doing massive damage. We believed that Ronald Reagan was right. That supply side economics actually works. And that if you will cut the taxes, if you will reduce the spending, that's a powerful message to job creators. That this was a different place. And that's exactly what we did. And Dr. Donna, we also did something else that session of the legislature that you really understand and know about, and that's we passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation. Yes. In 2000. So, here was the dynamic, is that you had, for the first time in modern history, Republican leadership in Austin, Texas, making hard decisions. We stood by our principles. And the principles were, you need to keep taxes as low as you can on the business creators. You need to have a regulatory climate that is fair and balanced and predictable. You need a legal system that does not allow for oversuing. And you must continue to fund an accountable public school system. Now keep one thing in mind. That legislative session in 2003, when we cut $10 billion out of our budget, out of the spending, we also increased funding for public schools. We put $1.8 billion more into public schools. Now, the easy thing I think to have done would just be, just cut straight across the board. Everybody take their licks. But that's not thoughtful prioritizing. And you want your leaders to be thinking. You want your leaders to help create an environment in this state where people want to come to Texas, where that they know that there's going to be a skilled workforce. And that's the fourth tenet that I think is you have to have in place. Taxes, regulations, legal system, and a skilled workforce, which basically translates into you funded an accountable public school system that's creating that skilled workforce. Then you get out of the way and let the private sector do what the private sector does best, and that's create jobs and in turn wealth. I told somebody, I said, listen, I'm just an animal science major from Texas A&M. But I get it when it comes to understanding the principles of governing. This is not rocket science. You don't have to be a PhD from Harvard in political science to understand the principles of how to govern. That will work. That'll work in Washington, D.C. I wish they'd give it a try. It will work. Listen, in last September, a year ago, when they were having that discussion in Washington about, oh my goodness, the financial ruin that is about to be upon us and our financial markets are going to melt down and we've got to do something. And I agreed with them. Matter of fact, I sent a letter to the members of Congress and said, do not be frozen by fear. You do need to address this financial situation. I didn't realize I needed to go, 1, quit spending all the money. 2, cut taxes. I thought maybe they would get that without having to be. But instead, you had Washington vote to bail out financial institutions, money that still today, I'll guarantee you, we don't know where all it went to. And it did not impact our financial markets at all. If anything, I think it helped drive them farther down. What do you think would have happened had Washington stood up and said, we're going to stop spending the money. We're going to cut spending and we're going to cut taxes. I guarantee you, the market would have responded. The market would have responded, I will suggest to you, in a positive way. And the fact is, there were some bad decisions made in Washington, D.C. I hope that our country, and I think what I'm seeing is that America, and I'm talking about, Judge, back in the 2008. I think you've seen it in tea parties. I think you have seen it in people being active. I think you see it in Republican women's clubs like this all across this state and this country where they're filled up with people who are ready to get in the fight.